If you have ever grown bell peppers, you have probably dealt with the frustration of a big, beautiful plant that just does not produce as many peppers as you expected. Maybe you got a handful of fruit when you were hoping for a bucketful. Well, in a lot of cases, the difference between an okay harvest and an incredible one comes down to one thing: pruning. In this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to prune your bell pepper plants from the seedling stage all the way through the growing season. We will cover when to prune, where to cut, and why each technique matters. Plus, stick around to the end, because I am going to show you an end-of-season pruning trick that can help ripen those last stubborn peppers before frost hits. Let's get into it. Bell peppers are one of the most rewarding crops you can grow in your home garden. There is nothing quite like slicing into a thick-walled, homegrown pepper that you nurtured from seed. And the good news is that with a few simple pruning techniques, you can dramatically increase your harvest and keep your plants healthy all season long. So let's start by understanding exactly what we are working with when we look at a pepper plant. Before you make any cuts, you really need to understand the basic anatomy of a bell pepper plant. Once you know what you are looking at, pruning becomes so much easier. So first, you have your main stem. This is the central stalk that everything else grows from. Coming off that main stem, you have your branches. And at the end of those branches, you will find leaves that are busy soaking up sunlight and producing energy for the plant. Now, at certain points along the plant, particularly where branches meet the main stem, you will notice smaller shoots emerging at roughly a 45-degree angle. These are called suckers, and they are important to understand, because deciding which ones to keep and which ones to remove is a big part of pepper pruning. You will also see flower buds forming, and of course, those flowers eventually become your peppers. The key spot to know about is something called the crown, which is where the main stem first splits into a Y shape. That is going to be really important in just a minute. Now let's talk about the first pruning technique, and this one happens when your plants are still young seedlings. It is called topping, and it is one of the simplest ways to encourage a bushier, more productive plant. Here is how it works. When your pepper seedling has developed about 5 to 8 sets of true leaves and is around 6 to 8 inches tall, you are going to cut off the very top of the plant, right above a leaf node. I know, it feels wrong. You have been nurturing this little plant, and now I am telling you to chop the top off. But trust me on this one. What happens when you top a pepper seedling is that the plant can no longer grow straight up from that central point. Instead, it redirects its energy into the side branches, and you end up with a bushier plant that has more branching points. More branches means more spots for flowers, and more flowers means more peppers. Now, not everyone tops their pepper seedlings, and you certainly do not have to. But in my experience, the plants I top consistently outproduce the ones I leave alone. Just make sure you do this early, when the plant is still in the seedling stage, and use clean, sharp scissors or pruning snips. The next thing you need to understand is the crown bud and why removing early flowers makes such a big difference. Remember that Y-shaped split I mentioned earlier? That is the crown of your pepper plant, and right in the center of that split, you will often see the very first flower bud forming. This is called the crown bud or crown flower. Now your instinct might be to get excited about that first flower. It means peppers are coming, right? But here's the thing. If you let that crown flower develop into a fruit, the plant puts a huge amount of energy into that one pepper very early in its life. And that actually slows down the overall growth of the plant. What I recommend is pinching off that crown bud as soon as you see it. Just use your fingers and snap it right off. While you are at it, go ahead and remove any other flowers that appear while the plant is still young and getting established. I typically remove all flowers until the plant is at least 12 to 15 inches tall and has a good, sturdy structure. I know it is hard to do. You want those peppers. But by delaying fruit production just a little bit, you allow the plant to put its energy into building a strong root system and lots of leafy growth. And that investment pays off big time later in the season when you have a robust plant that can support way more fruit than it would have otherwise. Now let's get into managing suckers and those lower branches, because this is where you can really shape your plant for maximum production and health. Just like with tomatoes, pepper plants produce suckers, those little shoots that pop up in the crotch between the main stem and a branch. With peppers, you do not necessarily need to remove all of them the way some gardeners do with tomatoes. But you do want to be selective. What I typically do is let the plant develop its main structure with 3 to 4 strong branches coming off that crown area. Any suckers that form below the crown, down on the lower part of the main stem, I remove completely. These low suckers are not going to be very productive, and they just take energy away from the upper part of the plant where you want your peppers forming. To remove a sucker, just pinch it off with your fingers if it is small, or use clean pruning snips if it has gotten a bit bigger. Now, for the lower leaves and branches, here is my approach. I remove any foliage that is within about 4 to 6 inches of the soil line. This does a few important things. First, it improves air circulation around the base of the plant, which helps prevent fungal diseases. Second, it keeps leaves from touching the soil, which is a common way for soil-borne diseases to splash up onto your plant. And third, it just makes it easier to water and mulch around the base without getting foliage in the way. Once I have cleaned up that lower section, I stand back and look at the overall shape. You want an open, vase-like structure that allows light and air to reach the interior of the plant. By the way, if this is making sense so far, hit that subscribe button so you do not miss more videos like this one. All right, let's keep going. Once your pepper plant is established and producing fruit, your pruning shifts to what I call maintenance mode. This is not about major cuts anymore. It is about keeping the plant healthy and productive throughout the season. Every week or so, take a few minutes to inspect your plants. Look for any dead or yellowing leaves and remove them. These are not doing the plant any good, and they can actually harbor pests and diseases. If you see any branches that are clearly damaged, broken, or rubbing against other branches, go ahead and trim those out. You also want to keep an eye on the interior of the plant. If it is getting really dense and crowded in there, you can selectively remove a few leaves to open things up. Better airflow means fewer problems with fungal issues, and it also helps pollinators access all those flowers. Another thing I watch for during this season is branches that are getting weighed down by heavy fruit. If a branch is bending dramatically or looks like it might snap, you have a couple of options. You can provide some support with a small stake or tie, or you can harvest some of the peppers a little early to relieve the weight. Do not be afraid to harvest peppers at the green stage if you need to. They are still delicious, and it actually encourages the plant to keep producing. Throughout all of this, just remember that pepper plants are pretty forgiving. If you accidentally take off a little more than you meant to, the plant will recover. Let's talk about some common problems you might run into and how to solve them. First, if you notice your pepper plant is producing tons of flowers, but they are just falling off without setting fruit, that is called blossom drop. This usually is not a pruning issue. It is typically caused by temperature stress, either too hot or too cold or inconsistent watering. Make sure you are watering deeply and regularly, and if you are in a hot climate, some afternoon shade can help. Second, if your plant looks leggy and stretched out with lots of stem and not much foliage, you probably missed the window to top it as a seedling. You can still remove some of the lower growth and encourage branching. but the plant may never be as bushy as one that was topped early. Third, if you see suckers growing like crazy and your plant is turning into a jungle, do not panic. Just get in there and start removing the ones below the crown and thin out the interior. It is better to prune late than not at all. Fourth, if you notice signs of disease on lowered leaves like spots or discoloration, remove those leaves immediately and dispose of them away from your garden. Do not compost diseased foliage. Fifth, if your plant seems to have stalled out and is not growing or producing new flowers, check to see if there is an early set fruit that is hogging all the energy. Sometimes removing 1 or 2 peppers can jumpstart the plant back into growth mode. The good news is, if you have been following the steps we covered, you should be able to avoid most of these issues entirely. Now for that bonus tip I promised you at the beginning. This is something I do every year at the end of the season, and it really helps me get the most out of my pepper plants before frost shuts everything down. It is called end-of-season topping, and it is basically the opposite of what you might think you should do. About 3 to 4 weeks before your expected first frost date, you are going to prune your pepper plants fairly aggressively. Start by removing all the flowers and any tiny peppers that have no chance of maturing before the cold arrives. Then, trim back some of the leafy growth, especially new growth at the tips of branches. What you are doing is sending a signal to the plant that it is time to stop trying to grow and start putting all its remaining energy into ripening the peppers that are already on the plant. I have found that this technique can help mature-sized green peppers turn red, orange, or yellow, depending on the variety, about a week or 2 faster than they would otherwise. And that can make the difference between harvesting ripe peppers and losing them to frost. Now the timing matters here. If you do this too early, you are just reducing your harvest. But if you wait too long, there is not enough time for it to make a difference. So mark your calendar for about 3 to 4 weeks before your average first frost, and give your plants that final pruning push. So that is everything you need to know about pruning bell peppers for maximum yield and healthy plants. We covered topping seedlings, removing the crown bud, managing suckers and lower branches, maintenance pruning throughout the season, troubleshooting common issues, and that end-of-season trick to ripen your last peppers. If you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you know whenever I post a new video. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Do you already prune your pepper plants? Have you tried any of these techniques? Or do you have a tip of your own to share? Drop it down below, because we are all learning together here. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.